Good morning and welcome to Daily Cyber Briefing for Friday the 24th of January. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Tesla. Interesting. So there's, I don't know whether you were aware, but there was how do you pronounce Pwn? Pwn2Own automotive hacking contest. I never did know how to pronounce that. Somebody can fill me in on what's the right way. Pwn2Own? I don't know. It sounds ridiculous to me. But anyway, that's what these events are called. An automotive version, automotive hacking contest that's been going on. And there has been, unsurprisingly, some very interesting stuff that comes out of that. First and foremost, Tesla's charging system has been hacked. It's been hacked at least twice. There's a group called PHP Hooligans that used what they describe as a numeric range comparison without minimum check bug to take over the charger and crash it. And then also Synacktic has managed to hack the Tesla EV charger through its charging connector. There are various other things that have come out of this. So the PHP Hooligans team also exploited, discovered 23 other exploitable zero-day vulnerabilities in Wolfbox, ChargePoint, HomeFlex, Autel Maxi Charger, Phoenix, Contact, Charks, and Emporia EV chargers. So I think it highlights, as we're aware already, that cybersecurity in the realms of the automotive industry, electric cars, is not as mature as it could be. So if you are considering getting an electric car, and we're not far off in the UK, if the government sticks to current regulations, it will be buy an electric car or don't have a car. These things are open to abuse. So there's been, over the last year or so, there's been quite a lot of vulnerabilities discovered in the cars themselves. But vulnerabilities in the charging systems, I think for me, are quite concerning, because the majority of charging systems in the UK I don't think are physically particularly well secured. There is a very big discrepancy, which hasn't really been addressed yet, that I think it's something like 40% of the population of the UK doesn't have access to off-street parking, and certainly in major cities, off-street parking is rare. Now, what they don't talk about is, of those people that do have access to off-street parking, what percentage of those actually are able to put their car in a garage, and what percentage are parking the car on some kind of driveway or forecourt of their house, and therefore the chargers have to live on the outside of their house. Well, if the charger's in your garage, you've at least got some level of physical security over it. If the charger's outside your house, that leaves it open to, let's say, given the sorts of vulnerabilities that are coming out in the space at the moment, it would have to be fairly targeted. But it does look like there would be possibilities for people to do dodgy things with your charger. And of course, if your charger's been hacked, how do you know that your car is still safe? It's like the whole area requires more thought, and I think more focus. And of course, then the question is, well, if you are one of those unfortunates that's been conned into buying did I say conned into buying an electric vehicle? Or you have to use on-street charging? I think we have been conned. Look at the costs of it. It's ridiculous. So if you are unfortunate enough to have an electric vehicle that you have to charge using the wholly inadequate UK on-street charging infrastructure, who's to say that those on-street chargers are safe and secure? And again, seeing as you're connecting a device which is the car itself, a device which is 100% dependent on its tech in order to function, and yet you put yourself, your family, your friends in it and hurtle around in what is a substantially heavy box that will happily do 100 miles an hour without knowing exactly what somebody might have uploaded in the way of dodgy software to your vehicles. I mean, there's already problems just out of the box. So it's slightly it's just second hand, but somebody I know has an electric vehicle which would switch into limp home mode randomly, including times when you might be doing 70 miles an hour down the motorway, and it would just go, oh, hang on, I've got to go into limp home mode now, and would reduce it pretty much instantly, reduce its speed from 70 miles an hour down to, I don't know what she said it was, but substantially less, like 30, 40 miles an hour or something, which is incredibly dangerous, especially because the car's doing it. And I don't believe that under those circumstances it would even put on the brake lights. It would just stop going. So, there's all sorts of dodgy stuff going on here. So imagine if you could trigger those sorts of things, you could cause chaos. And as we know, attackers are, certainly nation-state attackers, are as much as anything interested in causing disruption, but also in undermining trust. And, to be able to if there's a government policy of thou shalt not use petrol, but attackers can then undermine trust in electric vehicles, then that undermines trust in the value judgments and basically the common sense of the government itself, which is very much what that's very much one of the objectives of certain nation-state adversaries facing the West at the moment. Make of that what you will. And talking of governments, I'm sure regular listeners are aware of my concerns around government overreach. And I think last year we spoke on a couple of occasions about a very far-ranging Section 702, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act in the US, which basically is an old act. It was introduced in 1978, before digital communications were much more sophisticated than a fax machine. It allows the FBI to undertake surveillance of foreign nationals that are not physically in the US without a warrant. Now, what that's resulted in over the years is that the FBI has hoovered up digital communications. So if you're communicating with somebody in the States, the FBI, and you're not a US citizen, it's very likely that you're communications have been hoovered up by the FBI and sit in a database. Well, they've started to use that database just to trawl through and look for stuff. Okay, now that I think is allowed by this particular regulation. However, it is not. It was not intended to allow communications of US citizens to be swept up. Now, it's been one of those grey areas in law for a long time, but there has now been a ruling from a court in New York, which is being described as a landmark ruling, that has said, well, no, you can't do warrantless surveillance on US citizens using information collected under Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which I think is probably a good thing from a privacy perspective. One could always argue that by allowing governments visibility of everything, they might catch more criminals. Okay, now that is potentially true. However, I think my counter-argument to that is that I have not come across any government that is that interested in the minutiae of their citizens' lives that has anything other than malintent. So there are extreme examples. Gestapo in Germany, Germany in World War II, the KGB, the Stasi. But I think just generally, the government is at best incompetent with the data that it collects, so it doesn't secure it well, and it does, it does end up being used for things that it was never, it wasn't collected for. But at worst, it's used for oppression of every government would argue, "Oh goodness me, don't be ridiculous. We would never oppress our own people." Well, yeah, okay, you might think that, but you're not the only government that there's going to be, and I think having checks and balances around what agencies can do is a good thing. Also, as we've seen in the UK, when law enforcement becomes difficult, in order to continue to demonstrate they're doing things, they do easy things. So in the UK, it's penalising people for writing their thoughts in social media, rather than I don't know, investigating burglaries, perhaps, or prosecuting child abuse gangs in the north of England. It's like all this sort of stuff. They just go for the easy stuff. So allowing governments to collect this sort of information and use it, I think, is not always a good thing. There has to be some balance in this stuff. But anyway, it would be interesting to see what happens. Undoubtedly, the FBI, at a federal level, they will challenge this New York court. But we are, at least I think we can say there are people in the States, there is some movement towards balancing federal power against individual rights. So, yeah, thought that was interesting. Anyway, that's all from me for today. Hope you've had a good week, and I'll speak to you all again on Monday morning.